Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the APAC, second APAC Higher EdTech Innovation Conclave. This is a 3-day summit, and today we are on day 2. So 2 days we are focusing on higher education, and tomorrow on day 3, the focus will be on school education and the K-12, school and K-12 education. So yesterday on day 1, we had a very insightful inaugural session where different government policymakers spoke about the education roadmaps and how different facets of technology will impact a roadmap in the future. So now we had a series of panel discussions attended by different higher education and academicians and educators talking about different aspects of education and how technology is impacting that. Today we had a couple of very interesting sessions in the morning, and right now it's my privilege to introduce the panelists for a session on the impact of new generation technologies in higher education. As in fact, very ironically, the technical glitch that we suffered at our end in the beginning sort of indicates the challenges which, though academic institutions are using a lot of technologies, there's still technology can create glitches and other problems. So the question is, as India's premier institutions, most of you are not only leading those high-profile institutes, but also setting, if I may say, the academic roadmap for the country. And what we will try to bring out over the next 1 hour is how the acceptance of the newer technologies can help accelerate quality education imparting in the country. So we have a very esoteric set of panelists with us today, and it's my privilege to introduce each of them now. We have with us Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, Institute Chair Professor and Visvesvarya Chair Professor and Coordinator of the DST Unit on Nanoscience and Center for Environment Science and Engineering at IIT Kanpur, and he is the former Secretary of Department of Science and Technology. Welcome, Dr. Sharma. We have with us Dr. Pawan Kumar Singh, Director, IIN Tiruchirappalli. Welcome, Dr. Pawan. We have with us Professor B.S. Murty. He is the Director of IIT Hyderabad. Welcome, Professor Murty. We have with us Professor Rajeev Ahuja, Director of IIT Ropar. Welcome, Professor Ahuja. We have with us Nomesh, Professor Nomesh Bolia, Director, Center of Excellence Law and Technology, IIT Delhi. And we have with us Piyush Gupta. He is the head of Celebral Tech, the Microsoft partner. During the discussion, we will be joined by a couple of more panelists. So before we start and go deep dive into specific technologies, I would like to start with Dr. Sharma first. In terms of with your experience around the different premier education institutions, what do you think? What are some of those key technologies that you see a more wide-scale adoption? And sort of very briefly, if you can mention their use cases in enhancing the quality of education in these premier institutions. So let's first try to identify some of these key new gen technologies. Dr. Sharma, please.
Yeah, actually, the new gen technologies are not very difficult to understand. Actually, most of them are just a modified continuity of, WhatsApp or Skype or something. Essentially, it has all come into play in a big way in the last couple of years because of push by COVID-19. But these technologies yet are not immersive. They are not experiential. What I mean is, going from Internet of Things to Internet of Senses is something which is on the horizon. Whole lot of work going on there. What I mean by that, if you were to have an avatar and be immersive in the activities which are going on, these may be experimental, these may be classroom teaching, this may be interaction, what have you. But basically, if you were to wear a glove, so I'm not talking about today, I'm talking about few years, a decade down the road. I already pointed out that the technology that we use today for digital learning are basically it's a continuity of what we have known in the last 5 years, 10 years, even. So there have not been a great deal of disruptive changes in the technology. But the disruptive change has been in its widespread use because we are really pushed to the corner to be able to do that. There is no other way to do it. So now one understands the importance of having right kind of technologies so that a whole lot of things, so even in the normal classroom teaching, let me just point out very quickly one aspect, which is now over the years, over the last couple of decades, has been greatly neglected. That part of learning, which is experimental learning, so critical in science and engineering, in medicine, a whole lot of that learning has gone for a toss. And the reason is very simple, starting from high school, in fact, is that it doesn't help you crack exams. And since our education and learning are geared for cracking exams, the real your hands learning with your hands has gone for a great neglect, starting from the school days. Now, a whole lot of the school labs don't even open. I know that the teachers are not there. Very widespread problem. And you can't really blame teachers and students because they see no future for this kind of learning. They are, of course, wrong. But what I mean is the learning is immediately geared for cracking certain kind of exams where the learning doesn't help. So now think about an immersive technology, for example, that allows the feel of touch, of smell, all sorts of things like that. Very good interaction. So this would be able to integrate the experimental learning, whole lot of it, together with your theoretical instructions. Now, it is very important that experimental learning should be weaved in, should be totally seamlessly weaved in with theoretical lectures. It's no use, having a standalone lab and standalone lectures with very little correlation between the two. So that would become possible with the help of new technologies. Now, I don't know how much time I have, but I'd at least like to leave with one overarching idea. So when we talk about technology, and especially we're talking about here the exponential disruptive technologies coming together of communication, computing on the edge, integrating machine learning, tools of artificial intelligence, doing all of that, um, we must remember that every technology of this kind has a light and a shadow. Now, we must understand very clearly both the lights and shadows of this intervention through this technology so that we are prepared to minimize the shadows and encourage more light, if you would. And so that is often we kind of miss that because everybody is in a big hurry to say, look, oh, new technology, okay, let's go with that, and so on, which is perfectly fine. But remember that technology makes a good slave. It never makes for a good master. And so giving up things like, for example, in this context, my idea would be, okay, so learning has three aspects. There is the content of learning, which anyway you can open a textbook, you can open internet, and you can learn when you need to know that content. Another aspect of learning are the processes of learning, And the third aspect, in that processes of learning are included independence of thinking, problem solving abilities, synthesis, creativity, out of box thinking, connecting the dots of knowledge, and so on. All of these are processes of learning, which are again not greatly emphasized, and we have to pay attention to what technology would bring to processes of learning and not just contents of learning. In fact, contents of learning are of secondary importance compared to the processes of learning. And indeed, the process of lifelong learning, very rapid changes in the skill sets, in the information, in the applications, and so on, which require that there be lifelong learning. In that sense, of course, AR, VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, immersive reality, experiential reality, whatever you may call it, would be very useful. Because just because you get out of college, it doesn't mean that your learning actually stops. So I think that is a very positive point indeed, that would come in through these technologies. There are a whole lot more that we can speak at this point, but I think I've taken enough time as an opening speaker, just kind of saying few of the keywords that come to my mind about what technology can do, what technology cannot do, and we must understand what technology cannot do, how to do that as well. And this is about, a whole lot of this is related to the psychological, the cultural, the societal aspects of learning. Even let me just really, I would complete now. If you were to look at Maslow's hierarchical model of achievement and needs, if you were to look at Roti Kapda Makan, the contents of learning, they are more easily addressed by technologies. But as you were to go up, you get into psychological domains, the cultural, societal, the mind, if you would, the mind. The aspects of mind are not equally, very easily addressed by technologies. And that is a very critical point that we must remember while talking about technologies and their role in education and learning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. For that insightful opening remark, and two of the points I would like to focus deeper during this discussion. One is when you mentioned there has to be some synchronization or interweaving between the experiential learning and the theoretical learning that is happening. And the second is very more fundamentally the process of learning, especially lifelong process of learning, that needs to be inculcated in the minds of all students. So we would like to take those points subsequently. I'll come to you, Dr. Pawan. Um, my question is, we heard about one of these points on this interweaving of experiential learning with theoretical learning. Now, when we are talking about experiential learning, and probably the pandemic in 2 years sort of acted as a catalyst in accelerating this experiential learning, what are the role of technologies like whatever augmented reality, virtual reality, those technologies in enhancing the quality of experiential learning, and how are the academic institutions geared up for that?
Thank you, Shri Rajneesh ji. Thank you very much, and thanks to APAC Education. I'm very happy to be in this August gathering. And how much time I have, Rajneesh ji, for this first round of putting the ideas?
First round, I think, should be brief. Maybe a couple of minutes would be fine, so that we can discuss more.
Okay. So let me be fast and quick. You see, the new technology that has intervened in the education, that is going to stay. COVID-19 is going, should go, and we pray to the God that it should go. But technology and its more intervention into education, in all processes of education, assimilation of knowledge, or for dissemination of knowledge, or for creation of knowledge, or for implementation of knowledge, technology is going to stay. And that's why my first point would be every educational institution must find the ways, support, investment amount for investing into technology and technology-based education. That is point number one. Point number two, when technology is actually playing more role, every institution needs to be more empathetic in providing the skill and space for its, let us say, manpower in terms of faculty or non-faculty or students to gear up with this kind of situation. So a lot of technology, a lot of skills, a lot of science, but a lot of art also needed. A lot of hard skill needed, but a lot of soft skills also needed. Point number three is that see, when I was a student, or let us say, Rajneesh ji, perhaps you were also a student, professors used to be a storehouse of information, knowledge, and wisdom. But now, technology has taken away the role of providing information from professors. Because I don't think any professor can compete with technology and machine as far as being a storehouse of information is concerned. So at least professors can now delegate. And professor word, it means professor means one who should and can profess. And we had forgotten this particular activity that we need to profess also. And that's why professors now need to have, let us say, more time for creating knowledge, wisdom, and professing about it, delegating certain role to students, inviting their attention towards technology, getting information from there, and discussing the things at equal level. So professors and students, they are now in position to come to equal level, and gathering of information can be delegated to students, and professors can better profess. Next point and last point would be that, you see, we have been emphasizing in higher education always participant-centered learning. And Rajeev ji, you also raised the issue based on Professor Ashutosh ji's view that there has to be experiential learning also. Now, experiential learning basically is process-centric learning, whereas let us say lecturing is basically content-centric learning. That's why there are basically four types of learning, and this I'm emphasizing very important point here, that there are four types of pedagogy, and we have to see how technology can be used. One type of pedagogy is the teacher-centered and content-centered. The other is teacher-centered plus process-centered. The third one is participant-centered plus content-centered. And fourth one is participant-centered plus process-centered. Most difficult part to impart education through technology is basically, that is participant-centered plus process-centered. And that's why a blend of, let us say, what we conceptualized in early 80s about distance education, that distance education would not be devoid of face-to-face education. 20%, 15% of education would be face-to-face, and 85 to 80% education can be online. And that was called distance education. That was conceptualized in India in around 1980. And that I would like to remind that even online or technology-based education must have component of some face-to-face learning, so that we can also make best use of, let us say, experiential learning. Thank you very much for this round.
Thank you, sir. The two key points is that you very succinctly put the four components within the pedagogy, and also you mentioned about the distance learning, and maybe later during the discussion, we would try to analyze the differences between what was the distance learning in the 80s and 90s that you mentioned, and what is emerging as blended learning nowadays. In the meantime, Professor Mahadeo Jaiswal, Director of IIM Sambalpur, has also joined us. Welcome, Professor Jaiswal. My next question, I would direct to Professor Rajeev Ahuja. And my question is, when we are talking about using technology and we are talking about experiential learning, the role of virtual labs is critical. On the other hand, we know some of the science and the laboratories, maybe the chemistry experiments or some of the even physics experiments, it cannot be fully done virtually. It's just not possible. And in a blended kind of learning scenario, or the complete online kind of learning scenario we witnessed in the last couple of years, how will virtual labs integrate technology and at the same time be able to impart the actual physical or chemical or other scientific experiments? How can institutes manage that, Professor Ahuja?
Yeah. Thank you, Rajneesh. First thing I would like to mention that we were using this, as Professor Sharma already mentioned, that this technique like Skype or something we are using for a long time. But after the pandemic come, all of a sudden we all was not ready for that. And it take time to all of us to make a virtual labs, or how we can design our experiment so we can show them in a best way in a virtually. So we were not prepared for that. And our teachers, our faculty, they are used to only classroom teaching or classroom labs. So all of a sudden they feel a lot of pressure. And some of them maybe don't have think about or develop that kind of skills to how to make this lab virtual. So in the institution like in IITs, so there is a lot of emphasis based on this, how we can design. We cannot show all those experiments which we do in labs in front of the student. And we are focusing only those experiments which we can design and we can show virtually to our students or people around us. And so we have set up a special virtual labs in our institution. And then these we are using all this technology, which is already mentioned, our previous speakers, that all those modern days technology and learning process we are applying, and our experience which we are putting in now in a virtual mode. So that is one of the difficult part, how to integrate real experience to the virtual experience. So we are working on that one, and we are developing. And now you can see that when pandemic breakdown in the first year, we don't have a much experiment to show to our students. We were just doing without lab, we can say that the teaching was mainly. So, but now we develop those technology and we have developed those methods, how we do that. And other thing is that when we talk about virtual technology, if you talk about in context of India, 80% of our population is living in rural part of India. So what we have to think about, how those labs can reach to those students who are cannot come to the campus, or they are very far, where internet is not good. So we are developing a low bandwidth platforms where we can show this virtual labs to the students, because and these students are not very rich people, right? In the countryside, they are maybe using their mobile phone to look all these experiments. So how they can stay 1 hour or 2 hours lab on this virtual platform with a low bandwidth without disruption. So this is what we have to do when we want to implement technology with virtual labs. We have to develop a special platform country like India. So where I can reach to my teachers who are teaching in the villages or in a small towns, so they can take as advantage, not only for IITs or the Institute of Higher Learning, which they already have the infrastructure, but we have to think about that. And when we design this kind of experiment, and other thing is that when we talk about the quality education, and if you look at the United Nations SDGs, which are 17 goals they set for 2030, at that time they have not thought about pandemic. It was decided in 2015. The biggest part of that, if you look at the goals, if you look at the goal, they say that provide quality education. So now we have an opportunity, and we to take this opportunity, because pandemic give us this opportunity, that our quality education can reach even the countryside in small villages, and we can give the same quality of teaching to them while they are sitting at home, and where in the past they could not have the access. But now we have opportunity, and we should take this, and we make a concept of digital literacy skill. We have to create now, and we are at the right time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In fact, you raised a very pertinent point, and this I would come later again on more detail about the uniformity of technology across the country and the affordability issue. But you talked about certain innovative solution, the low bandwidth solution you talked about. So we will discuss in slightly more detail this question later. Next, I will come to Dr. Mukund Vyas, and my question is, some of the when we are talking about experiential learning and the learning in that way, something which is an obvious corollary of that is the assessment methods also. And from right now, the assessment procedure is more content driven or content related or content based, if I may say, to a shift towards a more competency based kind of assessment methods. What role technology can play in that shift, and how are the premier institution like yours geared up to do that? Professor Murty.
Yeah. Friends, first of all, I would like to say that online education is possibly not the best education for engineering, at least. Okay, engineering is supposed to be hands-on. And also, I feel if I have become a teacher, it is thanks that I have met great teachers. And this meeting and interacting with them is very essential, which many a times this online does not do that. I remember my teacher used to tell me during my BTech, I'm not here to cover a part of the syllabus. I'm here to, I'm not here to cover the syllabus, but cover a part of it so that you discover the rest of it. And that is something that stayed with me. In fact, to the extent that I tell that if a student does not want to attend my class, okay, as long as he does well in my course, okay, it doesn't matter whether he attends my class or not. If he thinks that there is something for him to learn from my class, then only he should attend, he or she should attend. And this is something for 30 years I have maintained it. I mean, though the IITs where I work said attendance is a must, okay, internally within my class students, they all know that Professor B.S. Murthy's class attendance is not a must. Okay, only if there is something to learn from him. So that's why Professor Pawan talked about information. As long as professors give only information, okay, then no student need to attend. Okay, so the job of a professor is to inspire a student. Okay, if that inspiration is imparted to a student, then students will definitely attend the classes. And that is something that can happen to a large extent by interaction. So there has to be a hybrid mode. Even if you want to have an online, at least a month or so, students should come and spend with the teacher. And there is a lot that you learn by talking to them over a cup of tea or something like that, or even beyond the class. So this is something I think education, particularly higher education, I would like to say. And of course, definitely at the school education also, because right now we are talking about only higher education. I think this is something everybody has to keep it in mind. Okay, and then the next question is, you see that the online has really helped us to reach out to large people. Okay, this is something that we have taken the advantage of it, and we were able to reach out to a large number of people and can reach out to any country. For example, IIT Hyderabad took the advantage of this COVID to start about 6 to 8 online EdTech programs, where we say that anybody working in an industry, you come to IIT only to collect the degree certificate, okay? And at the same time, have some contact program that you visit us and to clarify your doubts and things like that. So this is something, a plus point of online, which we should. So look at what are the advantages of online, where are the limitations of online, and if we can ensure that these two can be understood well and blend it well, then definitely we have a wonderful road path in the future. So this is something I thought I should bring it to the notice of everyone around you. It's not that everyone does not know it, but this is my personal opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You highlighted the advantages and disadvantages of online in the advantages is that it helps in expansion of the reach, while the disadvantage is obviously, especially for engineering and other sciences, having a direct physical contact with the between students and faculties is a sort of must.
In fact, I just want to add one point. This week, this Monday, we started offline classes. I mean, students are so happy to come back to campus. Okay, there's a lot of peer learning happens. Okay, and this peer learning is something that you will completely detach the moment you go completely online. So see, it's not just the subject that you learn. You develop the whole personality during your undergraduate education. And this personality development can only happen when you talk to people, learn from each other. I always say you learn from everybody you meet, either how to be or how not to be. Both are important lessons. Okay? And this can only happen by meeting people.
Sure.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Nomesh, I'll come to you next. An important aspect of technology, and which we have globally seen the Ivy League universities or even other premier education institutions around the world, there is a very active collaboration with industry and academia, driven by technology. So, as heading a center of excellence in a premier institution, in many cases, the center of excellences are, if I may use the word, excellent examples of this industry academia collaboration. How would you suggest the Indian premier academic institutions should drive these COEs for better industry academia collaboration, and how can this be emulated by other higher education institutions, which are maybe one rung below the premier institutes, but where also this collaboration with industry is imperative? And what's the role of technology there? Professor Nomesh.
Yeah, thank you, Rajneesh ji, for having me over. It's a privilege to be in such an august gathering with so many senior colleagues around here. So first of all, I'm not the director of this Center of Excellence. It's called a coordinator. We only have one director, which is the director of IT Delhi. But yes, so we have this Center of Excellence, and its idea, as with all centers of excellence, is to engage in research and development, not just in terms of publications, but also to actually create an impact in whatever domain we are working in. A lot of IITs now are talking about impact as well, in addition to research, and our Center of Excellence, at least we envision that to be leading in that sort of way. So this is one point that I wanted to highlight, is to not restrict research only to the problems that we think are interesting, but actually right from the point of identifying what sort of problems to work on, what technologies to develop, to developing those technologies, and finally executing them to just ensure that everything is working right or not. I think the industry should be continuously engaged, right, all through. And in doing that, of course, technology has a major role, right? So we all know how easy it is to do meetings, for example, in the simplest way. It is also comfortable in a lighter vein. You don't even know whether I'm wearing shorts or not right now, right? So I could be in any sort of getup and I can still attend the meetings. I can attend meetings one after the other, which I do, right? There are back-to-back meetings all through the day, and technology has made all of that feasible at a very simple level. As we go along, things will even get better. When we get better AR and VR technologies, the interaction will become even more fruitful, from beyond only conversations to even discussions, right? So in fact, we are trying to set up such a system in our own lab, where we don't just interact the way we are doing right now, but we also engage in discussion using multimedia technology, but all sitting in their own places, sort of a thing. So I think this constant engagement with industry is the key for good centers of excellence, and technology has a key role to play. But having said that, I'd just like to reiterate what all of my senior colleagues have said. It is, if we think that technology can substitute human beings, whether as teachers or as collaborators, I think we are in for a very rude shock as we go along. uh, in fact, I would go beyond what Professor Murty just said. Not just for inspiration, even when I have to teach, I teach a course which involves a lot of mathematics, right? So even in teaching mathematics, where it is all about equations, not necessarily a lot of hand feel, so to speak, even there, it is difficult to really communicate everything through the online medium. One can develop technologies and they can help, like Professor Ashutosh Sharma initially pointed out. It cannot become a master. It can only aid in all of what we are doing. Something as simple as when I take a class, I really want to see, or when I meet someone, I want to see what their body language is. I want to see the sparkle in their eyes. I want to understand what they're feeling. I want all of them to have empathy. I want myself to have empathy for them. All of those things cannot be done online or through technology. I think it's very important. And the reason why I'm highlighting all of this, despite so many iterations in the previous speakers, is there is a threat, as far as I think. And the threat is, see, so right now, for example, we are in a phase where we are talking about food security, nutrition, for example. I'm just giving an example, right, only to illustrate as an analogy. Let us say somehow there was a magic and, Kamdhenu, a lower version of Kamdhenu, right? We all know that story of Kamdhenu, were to come to us and it were to guarantee, let us say, roti and dal to each and every citizen of the country, right? The concern in my mind is, if such a Kamdhenu comes, everybody from the people to the government to nutrition experts, probably to families, parents, will forget about nutrition itself. They'll be happy because now there is roti and dal, right? And so, I mean, we would forget about going beyond that. My worry is, if technology takes good shape and we are not conscious of what all of us have been saying, we might actually be in that space where we feel a lot of education is happening because a lot of information is being disseminated, but knowledge and wisdom will be up for a complete toss. Thank you.
Thanks for playing the devil's advocate here on how we should look at technology adoption with requisite caution, if I may say. I'll come to you, Professor Jaiswal, next. And one question which I had earlier put to, I think, one of the panelists, but which have not been discussed till now. When we are talking technology assessment and a shift from a content-based assessment to a competency-based assessment is that's happening. And there, it's that both the stakeholders in the education ecosystem, faculties and students, it's critical, both are critical components in that. So how is technology helping in that shift towards competency-based assessments, and how are the institutions geared up for that?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I think in the age of digital disruptions, you have to understand that every industry has already moved in a big way in the use of digital technologies. Almost every industry, including manufacturing. Education and health, these are the two industries which we are lagging behind in a big way. And during the last 2 years, they have also taken a big leap. Now you have to understand that when you are asking this question in terms of impact and evaluations, I feel that there are three broad steps, or three stages in which the disruption has to be managed by every higher education. The step one is, right now we do teaching in the class, research in the lab or library or field, and interaction with the industry only at the time of placement or at the time of seminar conference. I think the first stage is we should integrate for experiential learning, that all three components has to come to the class. And that is possible when we shift our educations from information and understanding and knowledge to application and creation of knowledge. Digital technologies are well equipped for information exchange, understanding, and up to applications without the use of teachers. There are a lot of tools and techniques which can be used without coming to the class. Once we are in the class, teachers, industry, as well as the student will have to come and solve unsolved problems as a part of research, as part of experiential learning. And that pedagogy is called flipped classroom, which we have already started implementing at our institute. And that is a pedagogy which has been used in a big way in Harvard for many years, and also at MIT for business education at least, and I'm sure for engineering education as well. So that is the first step, that we need to integrate the 3 different components for experiential learning. In stage 2, there are 3 different components in education. The first is learning itself, education. Second is evaluation. And third is certification, that is degree or diploma, whatever you give. I think that is where, if we talk about new education policy 2020, which provides flexibility, and if you really want to implement that using digitalizations, you can disintegrate this 3 component. Learning should happen anywhere, any institutions, different time, any time. You don't have to come to one institutions for learning. You can learn many things online, many things offline, many things at this institute, many things at other institute, so that you have interdisciplinary learning education. Evaluation not necessarily done by the same teacher. It can be outsourced to third party, so that it is much more rational and much more transparent. And technology has a proctoring systems, many kind of exams which can be conducted, online proctoring, which we have been doing in a big way. And there are tools, AI, everything, which can help you to do evaluations online. And the certifications can be done joint, not necessarily that only IIT will give degree. It can be IIT, IIM, AIMS can provide a integrated degree, interdisciplinaries, or a university can also join. That is called stage 2, that is disintegrating the 3 different components of education. Stage 3 is, that is called integrations for global integrations for democratization of educations. That is where I feel digital technologies will provide an opportunity to integrate with overseas universities, best universities. And that is where we should provide the certification, diploma, learning, everything internationally by different institutions, and not confined to only one country educations. So if tomorrow I feel that I must do some course at Harvard, some at MIT, some at IIT, some at IIMS, that should be permitted. That is allowed already at NEP. And that is called complete democratization of educations. It means the same quality of education is available to every person sitting anywhere in the world. I think that should be the future of education. That should be the disruptions. And I think India must take lead in taking that as a directions, using technology in a big way, because we have different kind of tools and techniques available at lower cost as compared to the Western part of the world in terms of technology. And we cannot provide the high quality physical infrastructure at every institutions across country. However, digital technology can equate that disparity which exists today. That's why we have only few IITs and few IIMs which provide high quality engineering and management education. I think that is a discrimination to a large section of society. I think complete democratization of education is possible with the proper use of disruptive technology like digital technologies. So that is what is my stake in the.
Thank you. Thank you. The democratization of education, that is one thing we would like to talk a little bit next. Next, I'll come to Piyush. Piyush Gupta is a global head of ERP modernization techniques at Celebral Tech, which is a Microsoft partner. So, Piyush, my question to you is, you heard all the academicians talking about different aspects and, if I may say, the outcomes of technology deployment. So, as a technology solution provider, when you are working with universities, how do you add value in terms of technologies like AI, ML, data science, and how do you integrate that with the academic curriculum, and how can you add value to the curricula of these universities? Piyush.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Rajneesh. And first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to being a part of this platform with such esteemed guests. And maybe to your point, as you were saying, Rajneesh, how can Celebral help as a part of the whole education that we are talking about? So, in fact, as Celebral, we have been working with different colleges across Pan India. Wherein the idea is, and maybe if I just take a step back, what I've been hearing, and I think one common thing which is coming as a part of this discussion is the whole focus on the experiential learning, the ability to connect, the ability to have the real-time interactions, And maybe in this current pandemic, some of those interactions can kind of be virtual too. But then I think there is a lot of focus which needs to be there. And that is where, as Syllable, what we have been working is with a different colleges pan India. There are colleges in Rajasthan, in Maharashtra, and then in the NCR region as well. So what we are trying to do is, we are trying to work with the students, the college students, and give them the more real time experiences that they're going to get into from a the real time world perspective, right? So while we are talking about one part of it, which is the whole education or the learning, right? So they'll get to learn AI/ML, but how will the really AI/ML come into play, right? How can they apply the learnings that they have got in the real life world? So that is where we work with the colleges. We have set up labs. For example, there is Purnima College, group of colleges in Rajasthan, where we have already set up a dedicated lab where we educate and we give the students this kind of an experience. So we give them real-time projects, maybe what could be a real-time scenario that they could get into, and help them apply the learnings and be ready for the real world as soon as they step out of the college. At the same time, we working with them from a faculty perspective as well, in the sense there are people from our organization who would be available on a continuous basis, something around which could be 2 to 3 hours in a week, where they spend quality time with the students for any of their issues, challenges that they may be facing from a technology perspective, get them up to speed with what could be the different ways to resolve those problems, and then apply and maybe move forward on that. So with that approach, what we really get to see is the students are more experienced when they step out of the college. By the time they step out of the college, they understand what would be the real-time scenarios that they would be facing, and at the same time that learning has further been enriched in terms of the experiences that they have got in terms of doing certain capstone projects, which make the whole learning a little more robust. And that spans across whether it is the AI/ML part of it or the data science part of it across. So being a premier partner for Microsoft, Syllable definitely has that competence, and that is how we kind of help the different colleges that we already are working with.
Thank you. Thank you. We have taken a view of each of the panelists, and now I'll come back to Dr. Sharma. And we heard two important points, and I would like to take your view on both those points. You mentioned a little bit of forward movement over the next decade, what is likely to happen. So one fundamental question that came up when we are talking about technology deployment, one, the quality of technology, be it the internet connectivity or even the power infrastructure, is definitely not uniform across the country. So when we are talking about standardized education or democratization of education across the country, how do you manage when the infrastructure itself is not uniform? And even more critically, there are students from different socioeconomic strata. So the affordability of technology question also comes up. How can the institutions manage this dichotomy, if I may say? And the other question I would like to put to you is, especially we heard one of the panelists mentioning about NEP. And NEP, the interdisciplinary learning and everything, that's very good. The concept-wise, that's what global practices are centered around that, and we should emulate that in India. But the question is, when we are talking about interdisciplinary learning, there's a lot of flexibility involved. Now, my question is, how much should we go on being flexible? what should be that optimal degree of flexibility? Because if there is too much flexibility also, then there would be obvious confusion. So how would we define, or how much should that flexibility level be, Professor Sharma?
So, okay, your first question is about the delivery. If you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have all those things, how do you do that? Now, one of the things we talked about was experiential learning. And it's not necessary that you must be connected with internet for that to happen. For example, we talked about immersive experiments and participation in it. That could be done offline, because if you produce, let's say, the contents, this software, what have you, on different experiments, and then you have these goggles or that stuff that you need to wear for it being more immersive. All of that could be supplied offline. So I think that solutions would indeed emerge that would allow this to happen. The second aspect that you talked about was multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, NEP, and so on. Sorry, I'm going really fast. Actually, each of these things require very deep, many hours of discussion, but time is short, so 30 seconds. Multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, out of disciplinary, transdisciplinary, nobody's land, whatever. Okay, all of these are very nice, words to which we have been paying lip service. And the reason for it is that the whole thing is a misunderstanding. First, we fragmented the knowledge. We took these fragments very seriously. Now, when you want to solve a problem, you say, look, none of these fragments are actually able to do it. So now you get back and you say, hey, how to be multidisciplinary, how to be interdisciplinary. So it is like first you create a problem and then you are looking for a solution. And then, in the process, you come up with some nice sounding words. What is actually required is this understanding at the very grassroots. And actually, our department-centric higher education is not very conducive to it. So department-centric higher education simply means that everything related to getting a degree, to recruitment, to promotion, to awards, to rewards, everything is basically centered on a particular tool or a discipline. Now, so that becomes so important in people's lives that they cannot change, they cannot think outside of it, and they're not really into problem solving. So now the solution for that actually is to have two parallel systems. Department-centric system, which is geared for undergraduate education, for giving an identity, for finding a job. Now, this is not to be extrapolated in terms of PhDs, postdocs, training, research, and so on. For that, one needs a completely different structure, process, and architecture, if you would, which are existing side by side. They are, for as long as we understand what the meaning and the goals of each of these structures are, whether you call it a school, you call it whatever you call it, one doesn't really matter, but it has to be given equal empowerment and equal importance when you come to higher education, especially those components that involve creation of knowledge and not just dissemination of knowledge. So I would conclude there, and there are very many other things to be said, but it's a complex topic.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Pawan, my question to you, especially from your institution perspective, if we may look at the next 12 to 18 months, what are the planned technology deployments, especially with the view to upskilling, or if I may say reskilling, both faculties and students? How would you be leveraging technology for that?
Thank you, Rajneesh ji. In our institute in IIM Tiruchirappalli, we have already geared up for the future, thinking that still situation is fluid. However, hoping that time has come to go for face-to-face teaching or training. Fine, as we know that as far as knowledge creation is concerned through research, especially in Management Institute, even 15 years back, we have gone online. And a new problem has arisen that so much investment in library, but how to increase the footstep in the library. So it is already online research going on. That is one. But as far as IIM Tiruchirappalli's preparation is concerned, we have already identified that our institute has two geography. One geography which is more inclined towards face-to-face education, and other geography is where we have equipments, facilities for online education. So just 2 days back, COVID committee, and I agreed with that, COVID committee of our internal institution, that after a long time, we are opening entry of participants of one public sector company, and after 12 or 13 days, we are going to have face-to-face training here after a long time. So we have started with equal respect to online, of course, education, because our 9-month or 1-year duration online long duration program for working executives is spread across the country. We are also catering to their needs, because we know that everybody cannot come to our institution. That's why institution has to reach to them. And that's in that way we can actually serve the cause of education or learning or training for the entire country in terms of capacity building. So just to say in summary, because I know there is maryada of time, that IIM Tiruchirappalli is geared up by respecting both the fields of, let us say, education, face-to-face and online. Just to conclude, I would like to say that out of 100% learning that a student gets, 25% he gets from classroom plus teacher, 25% he gets from peer group learning, 25% he gets from say swadhyaya, self-learning, and 25% he or she gets through experiences of life. And that's why I would like to agree with Professor Murty also, and to all other fellow colleagues, that certainly there is need of more rubbing shoulder with your colleagues, peer group learning. But I also intend to agree with Professor Mahadeo ji, who said that actually future is for, let us say, democratizing the education. That is also a challenging field, and we have to work towards that. So I would like to say, कर्ता ने कर्म को करण से, ये हमने हिंदी व्याकरण में पढ़ा, but करण से, करण means instrument technology, but only focusing on karan will not help. Karta and karam. Karta means actually the person who is learning and person who is giving learning, and karam means actually what we need to do in terms of generating knowledge or creating knowledge and disseminating knowledge. We have to focus. So karan is only instrument, and as it is said, especially in social science, mathematics is a good servant but a bad master. And I would like to agree also in the beginning, Professor Ashutosh ji also emphasized that let us treat that as our servant, rather a master, the technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you for connecting Karta and the Karam part of that. Professor Ahuja, my next question again, specifically a little bit on the technology deployment in IIT Ropar, as well as we had heard panelists talk about collaboration. Briefly, if you can mention especially technology related collaboration that you are planning.
As an institute, we can collaborate in 3-4 different ways. Like we can do like a research and knowledge sharing between different and ideas of the labs and in form of the workshop. And another thing is an internship program, as well as the certificate program, which was already touched by different speakers. So this is collaboration is very important. And I can tell you, when I joined here, I said there is only 2 ways to successful. One is, there's 2 mantras. One is innovation and other is collaboration. So collaboration and innovation, they go together. So we have to collaborate. And this collaboration can be in these 4 ways. Like, as I already mentioned, in the certification program, we can compare we can collaborate with other institutions. And internship program, also we can collaborate with other institutes, and the idea of the common labs and workshops and research and knowledge sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Murty, I'll come to you next. You had mentioned a very pertinent point in the beginning. So this time I will ask you more specifically the technology roadmap for IIT Hyderabad, and more importantly, how do you see the future, both from the reskilling part that is required of the faculty as well as the teacher? It's a reorientation. Maybe the reskilling is not the right word. Reorientation. How can technology help that to happen?
Yeah. As one of my colleagues earlier pointed out, this reorientation is much easier in younger generation because they are used to this kind of gadgets, if I can say so, which the older generation they were always chalk and talk kind of faculty members most of the time. So there is definitely always a lot of learning. I always say this: teacher ceases to be a teacher if he or she is not a student all the time. Okay, so that is a very very important factor that one need to be considering in life. So as a result, I think there has to be a number of if we can say faculty development programs can be conducted in aspects like this, that such so that this reorientation happens much more quickly. What we have started doing at IIT Hyderabad, we are converting all our classrooms into right now digital classrooms. Okay, first of all, I have always been a blackboard teacher. Now when I use this board, where whatever I write and then just swap it and it goes, and I bring it back whenever I want to bring it. It was a wonderful experience to me, which I have never done that. Earlier, I erase the board, it's gone. Okay, so now it's not gone. Okay, whenever I want to bring it back, I can bring it back and show to them a particular equation which I have written there earlier. So there is a lot of tools that are available now, which we can use to you. Of course, it takes a little time for you to orient yourself, reoriented, as you rightly mentioned, but that is not very long. I mean, at the age of 57, I could learn it in one day. Okay, so as a result, it is not very difficult for people to learn, and we are trying to do it in such a way that slowly we are preparing ourselves to a day very soon where a student will be sitting somewhere in Dubai or somewhere in Manchester and listening to my lecture here, where half of my class is in front of me and the rest of the class is anywhere in this world. Okay, so this is important, and we should gear ourselves towards that, and it is possible. I mean, of course, a little bit of effort has to be put in from the side of our side, and I'm sure a good teacher is always ready to put in that effort. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Professor Nomesh, again, since in the last round you sort of cautioned us about the perils of overusage of or over dependence, if I may say, of technology. My direct question is, IIT Delhi has always been on the forefront of leveraging different kinds of technologies. So in terms of next few months, if I may say, or next one to 1.5 years, as we come back to an offline mode, and a likely blended learning mode is likely to emerge. So what are the technology priorities in IIT Delhi?
So it's just like the other speakers have been talking about. Essentially, we are yet to see a full-fledged disruption, like it was pointed out earlier. So it will be essentially using some tools that we have for evaluation, which we are using right now. We hope to make them better. For example, invigilation is still a challenge, right? In when we do online evaluation, so that has to be figured out. We are working towards that. None of the current solutions seem to be matching what we expect, and so that is something that we need to work out. But in terms of at least making technology available for everyone to access, I think we have made quite some steps. Although, of course, all students are waiting to come back, but even wherever they are right now, we have made sure that everybody has good access to bandwidth and this and that. Wherever we could help, we have helped. Once they come back, such things will not be an issue. But this little jump for for making from access to actual immersion while using technology, which enables us to take care of all the three aspects of teaching that we talked about. I think that is something that we are working on. No ready-made solution exists, and I hope we'll be able to do a good job. But again, having said that, I don't think we are going to be in a mode where it will be completely online, completely tech-based. I think the human touch from all sides, faculty to students, is still in very high demand, and probably more so after this gap in the pandemic.
Thank you. Professor Jaiswal, you talked about the democratization of education earlier. So my question is again specifically at IIM Sambalpur, how technology you plan to prioritize over the next 12 to 18 months. And an addendum to that is, as a premier institution, what roles and responsibilities you would like to play with the other, if I may say, not so premier academic institutions, helping them so that they can also improve the quality of learning they impart, and the role technology will play in that collaboration.
Thank you. At IIM Sambalpur, even before COVID, we had a complete digitalization of our education. Like every classroom is made smart board and hybrid mode, because being located in a remote place, that was our need. That many times visitors, faculty, they were not able to come sometimes. So we wanted that, and we already had online proctoring exam even before COVID. We experimented that for our admission test. We were the first IIMs to start with online proctoring exam for our admissions, written exams. So those things we did just before COVID. In terms of reorienting our faculty, we made sure that it was compulsory that everybody has to use smart board. No physical board is allowed. We have removed everything physical. Even in the class, when students are there in persons, it has to be smart board, because everything is recorded, so that if somebody missed the class, that is given to them. So that is the advantage of technology. Now coming to the component, there are three broad objectives of any educations, any subject, higher or lower. One requirement is that they have to understand the subject, conceptual understanding. And the second is application of what they have learned, then they can apply in the industry. And third is whether they can create something new which does not exist in the literature. Now, who can be the best person, best teacher to provide understanding concept? That is where the virtual teacher are the best teacher in terms of basic concept and understanding, because it is all very structured, and many times you can learn from MOOC and YouTube yourself anytime. So that understanding part of any subject, I think virtual teacher is the best, because physical teacher will find it very repetitive, coming every time, same thing teaching. And there's a limited time, only 60 hours, 60 minutes, and 90 minutes. So therefore, the virtual teacher is the best who can provide the understanding of the subject. When it comes to the application of the subject, any subject, I think it is industry which is the best place to learn. So it has to be industry interface for applications. We can't learn in the class, because you have to go to industry or society and say whether it's engineering problem or management problem or science problem or bio problems or medical problem. You have to go to the patient or go to the industry. So that is where the application of knowledge can happen best in the society and industry. And when it comes to the creation of new content and new knowledge, I think that is where the physical teacher is required, because that is where you need to debate, discuss, collaborate, and you need to spend time in understanding and applying the concept, and then coming out with something which innovations can happen. So that is where the physical teacher. So therefore, we have to understand very clearly, if you really want to improve the productivity of a teacher, let him spend less time in helping the student to learn the basic concept. Let him spend more time in terms of understanding how to create new knowledge, so that he's also excited and the learning happens in a different way. And when it comes to application of the knowledge, I think the best thing, we should interface with the industry, either through internship or through flipped classroom inside the class, whatever ways we want. We have introduced flipped classroom because internship is only once in a year, but we wanted every course should have industry application. So we have created that. When you're teaching PhD, it is primarily creations. So that is where I think physical teacher is must. And when it comes to applications, we have to have flipped classroom. And for all basic concept we have made student to be responsible themselves. They go through their course online, and the online evaluations. Once you get good grade, then you can come to the class for further education. So that is the model which we have created, and partly we have implemented, but definitely that is the way out. And this is the only way we can democratize education, because physical education cannot be part of democratization. It has to be blended educations, partly physical and partly digital.
Thank you. Thank you. Understand that. Piyush, my question is, as a technology solution provider, how can you sort of collaborate with the universities and identify what will be the best practices that can drive the institutional excellence and governance with these universities?
Sure, absolutely. As an organization and as an experts from an industry perspective, especially in the technology areas, so we know with the know-how that we have from the needs that this industry has, what we have already done is we have defined, very well-defined learning paths vehicles for students as a part of their learning map. In case they would want to pursue whether it is AI, ML, or the data science part of it, there is a defined path that we have created. Secondly, we have created these different labs, and this has again been an operation for more than 4 years now. And when we got hit with the pandemic, we ensured that even when we are trying to do these things virtually, we ensure that there is an alignment from a student as well as from a learning perspective. And again, another thing which I am a firm believer is, see, the learning starts from the self intent. As long as there is a self intent that I want to learn, and that's where we kind of enroll these students as a part of this program, and that's where this whole learning starts, where experts from Celebal come in, provide the industry know-how, they provide the industry insights to these students and make them learn as a part of this journey. Then subsequent to that, and I think we kind of start very early, we start in the 6th semester as well, so that by the time they are getting into their summer internship, they can come and join us physically as a part of our office, our company organization, and whether they're working then virtually or they're just still being part of the physical presence. But then they get to learn so much that they by the time they are getting into the final year, and maybe if there is again a possibility of getting into another internship or paid internship, we kind of even provide that platform. So that way, from a technology perspective, what we are ensuring is, while there is an education which is happening, at the same time, we are collaborating with the colleges and ensuring that they get the know-how from an industry perspective. And, and then by the time they complete their education, they are ready to get into the industry and, with flying colors. Yeah. So that way, I think we've been helping. And just to throw certain numbers, this year we have made the program so robust that we have been able to scale it up to cater to around 400 individuals pan-India.
Thank you. That's great to know. So we are almost running out of time. So Professor Sharma, you had the opening remark, and I will come to you for the conclusion also. And the concluding comment, what I would like you to do is, you mentioned a little bit of crystal ball gazing. I would like you to do, maybe not for a decade, but the next 2 to 3 years. You talked about immersive techniques. I would like to, next 2 to 3 years, how would you foresee Indian higher education? What are the key elements you see that are likely to happen?
So very good thing. But let me point out that nothing happens in 2 to 3 years. So we have seen, even when we are pushed against the wall in COVID-19, we continue to use pretty much the same technologies which have been around for a long time. Now, there is a reason for it. Of course, the human mind and the society at large has inertia which changes things with a small slope in a linear way, whereas technology can change rather exponentially. But his adaptation and his diffusion and his understanding and leveraging it is all through, those are the aspects which are not related to technology. Those are related to the way we do business, the culture, our psychosociological makeup, and so on. So okay, you're asking 2 3 years. It'll be, only thing I can say is that the tools we have been using last couple of years would be more pervasive. People would accept them more. They will understand them more. They will know how to put better use to those tools. I doubt that anything very radically different in terms of technology is going to happen. Now, if you were to look at a horizon which is a decade or larger, many things would happen. In particular, it is about being immersive experience. It is about being there, if you would, and having that experience. It would be about also, taking a little bit greater control of the knowledge pyramid. Now, of course, we do measurements, we do data, we do information, and all of that. Machines will get good at it. Pattern recognition and so on. Getting something out of tons of data, armload of data, machines will do that. So we will have to start focusing on, of course, putting that information to use, to knowledge, to wisdom, to getting control of all of these processes and be into innovation and so on. So, and actually, what is it? Let me just conclude very quickly, because this is not a never-ending topic. So I'm sorry, first of all, to disappoint you about the next 2 to 3 years. To my mind, nothing radical is going to happen. That is more of the same, if you would, which is good. I mean, I'm not disappointed in that. It's good, right? We need to build on a foundation, and that foundation has to be there to build further on it. Now, to my mind, the most important thing is this capacity to change, to accept, and to leverage. And one has to work actually on those aspects which are cultural, social, and so on. Second most important aspect, I would, at the risk of repeating, is what I said. Eventually, when when technology gets very good, we will have to think about why did we need that technology in the first place. And we would not a short answer, which is saying, look, I wanted to educate people better and so on. I want democratization of knowledge and education. Those are all very good goals, but there is something beyond it. And so increasingly, we will have to ask, what is it that this technology is doing for me in terms of the deepest desires of my mind, the human mind? And therefore, the top half of the Maslow's hierarchical needs would have to be addressed in some ways. And like I said, so far we are not paying attention to it through technology. Of course, there were the old tradition of paying exclusively attention to those needs, and not so much needs of, you may call, roti kapda makan, to sufficient extent, but not through technology. And now, because of technology, we are exclusively hung up on those needs, which is good, and nothing to be said about it, except to say that we will have to come back full circle and saying, what is the real need of society, of the people, their minds, and are we satisfying those needs by technology or otherwise, or by a holistic fusion of the traditional wisdom and technology? So eventually, a fusion of this would have to evolve. And I haven't any doubt that the faster, the earlier we start thinking about it, better it would be for the roadmap of the future, before people, in fact, get taken in totally by the neon soul of technology and start thinking that there is nothing beyond it. That would be a total disaster. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we heard uh, some important points which came up. One was that maybe next few years, even though status quo might be maintained, but even that is good as a foundation. We heard about the need to synchronize experiential learning with theoretical learning, and a blended learning kind of model which is likely to emerge. That doesn't mean physical learning in the form of faculty-teacher interaction need to remain, but in certain cases, even the online education imparting will become prevalent. We heard about democratization of education and the need for collaboration. And very importantly, we heard many of the panelists playing sort of devil's advocate and talking about too much reliance of technology might not always be that great a thing. So thanks to all the panelists for paucity of time. Otherwise, we could have continued. For being such an interactive discussion. And I'm sure it was very useful for all the people who are watching it. Wishing all of you a good day, and thanks for this interactive discussion. Thank you all.